Assalamualaikum and hello doctor. We are from group 10 and our group presentation is titled A Marxist Reading of The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. In this presentation, we will be analyzing the novel using Marxist literary theory, focusing on issues such as power, control, and exploitation within the post-apocalyptic society in the text. Although the novel is commonly seen as a science fiction or horror story, we argue that it also presents important social commentary related to class hierarchy and authority.
The Girl with All the Gifts is a post-apocalyptic dystopian novel written by M.R. Carey. The novel focuses on Melanie, a second-generation infected child held in a military research facility. Together with other children, she is restrained, controlled, and studied by soldiers and scientists. These authorities believe that the children's infection can help create a cure. As a result, the children are placed in a powerless position while the adults control their knowledge and survival. This power imbalance makes the text suitable for analysis through a Marxist perspective.
For this slide, I will discuss the key themes in The Girl with All the Gifts from a Marxist perspective. One of the most important themes is class hierarchy and power. In the novel, power is clearly controlled by the military and scientists, while the infected children are placed at the lowest level of society. They have no freedom, no voice, and no control over their own bodies. Another key theme is exploitation of our bodies. The infected children, especially Melanie, are not treated as human beings but as biological resources. Their bodies are used for experiments in the hope of finding a cure, which reflects how Marxism critiques systems that value usefulness over humanity. The novel also highlights ideology and dehumanization. Scientific reasoning and survival narratives are used to justify cruelty, making exploitation appear necessary and acceptable. Finally, the theme of resistance and transformation emerges through Melanie, whose growing awareness challenges the legitimacy of this unequal system.
Hello everyone and Assalamualaikum. My name is Ayuni Shafika and today I will explain Marxist literary theory, which is a critical approach used to analyze literature through social and economic perspective. This theory focuses on how power, wealth, and class relationships shape society and are reflected in literary texts. Founded by Karl Marx in the mid-19th century, Marxist criticism as a means how capitalist systems create inequality and influence characters, themes, and conflicts in literature.
Marxist literary theory is suitable for analyzing The Girl with All the Gifts because the novel clearly shows an imbalance of power between different groups. In the story, power is mainly held by the military and the scientists who control knowledge, resources, and decision-making. On the other hand, the infected children are placed in a subordinate position and are treated more like objects than individuals. From a Marxist perspective, this reflects the idea of exploitation where certain groups are valued only based on what they can contribute to the dominant class. The children are not prioritized for their humanity but for their usefulness in helping the ruling group survive. Therefore, Marxism helps us to understand how domination and control are normalized and justified in the novel, making it an appropriate framework for analyzing the text.
The first key concept in Marxist theory is class struggle. According to the Karl Marx, society is divided mainly into two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie are the wealthy ruling class who own the means of production, while the proletariat are the working class who sell their labor to survive. Class struggle happen because the ruling class, bourgeoisie, controls resources and power, while workers, proletariat, remain economically dependent. In literature, the struggle is often shown through conflict, inequality, and oppression between social classes. Moving on to the second concept, which is ideology and false consciousness. Ideology refers to sets of beliefs created by the ruling class to justify their power and control. These beliefs make capitalism appear natural and acceptable, such as the idea that poverty is caused by laziness or that workers must obey their employers only to have the salary. False consciousness happen when the working class accept this idea without questioning them. As a result, workers fail to realize that they are being exploited and discriminated. In literary texts, this can be seen when characters accept unfair system and suffering as normal. Lastly, as the final concept is exploitation and commodification. Exploitation happen when workers produce goods but receive low wages while the employee, bourgeoisie, take most of the profit. Commodification refers to the process where human labor, time and skill are treated as commodities with monetary value. Under capitalism, workers are valued based on productivity rather than humanity. Marxist literary criticism uses this idea to analyze how texts portray labor, bodies, and lives as expendable, highlighting the loss of human dignity in profit-driven system. In conclusion, Marxist literary theory examines how literature reflects social and economic inequality. Through concepts such as class struggle, ideology and false consciousness, exploitation, commodification, it reveals how power and control operate within capitalist system. This theory helps readers to understand how literary texts critique oppression and highlight the impact of classroom differences on human life.
From a Marxist perspective, the novel highlights exploitation and commodification. Firstly, the infected children are treated as commodities, valued for only their biological usefulness. Second, the scientists and military act as the ruling class by controlling resources and making life and death decisions. Third, the children are dehumanized through restraint and labeling, which removes their individuality and justifies exploitation. Finally, Melanie challenges the system. Her intelligence and emotions reveal this injustice of treating conscious beings as mere resources, exposing the moral value of the dominant power structure.
From a Marxist perspective, ideology functions as a tool used by the ruling class to justify oppression. In The Girl with All the Gifts, humans construct an ideology that defines hungries as monsters rather than sentient beings. This belief allows them to dehumanize hungries and treat them as objects for experimentation. Despite Melanie's intelligence and emotional depth, she is still labeled as a subject, showing how dehumanization strips the oppressed class of identity. Marxist theory suggests that this process is necessary for the ruling class to maintain power, as recognizing the hungry's humanity will challenge human dominance. Therefore, dehumanization in the novel is not accidental but ideological. According to Marxist theory, resistance begins when the oppressed develop class consciousness. Melanie gradually realizes that humans will never see her as equal, regardless of her intelligence or morality. This awareness marks her awakening to systemic oppression. Her final act of releasing the spores and burning the remaining human structures represents revolutionary change. From a Marxist viewpoint, this destruction symbolizes the collapse of the ruling class and the end of an exploitative system. Melanie's resistance suggests that true liberation cannot occur within existing power structures only through their overthrow.
From a Marxist perspective, the ending of The Girl with All the Gifts represents the collapse of the old ruling system rather than its recovery. The military and scientific authorities who once controlled society lose their power, symbolizing the breakdown of system built on domination, hierarchy, and exploitation. The ending also marks a rejection of exploitative ideology. Throughout the novel, the belief that some lives must be sacrificed for the sake of progress is used to justify cruelty and violence. Melanie's final decision directly challenges this idea by refusing to preserve a society that depends on the suffering of the oppressed. At the same time, The novel imagines the birth of a new social order. The future no longer belongs to the former ruling class, but to the infected children who were previously marginalized and dehumanized. This shift reflects a Marxist vision in which power is transferred away from the dominant groups. Rather than restoring the old world, the novel embraces revolution. It suggests that meaningful change cannot come from reforming an unjust system, but from dismantling it entirely and allowing a radically different future to emerge.
When The Girl with All the Gifts is read through a Marxist perspective, the focus shifts away from the simply viewing the infected children as threats or monsters. Instead, attention is given to the social systems that allow their exploitation to happen. Rather than blaming individual characters, Marxist criticism helps us see exploitation as something that is built into the structure of power within the novel. Scientific authority and military control function as ideological tools that justify harmful actions in the name of humanity's survival. This perspective also changes how we understand the ending of the novel. The collapse of the human-controlled system can be seen as the failure of a dominant class that relies on oppression to maintain power. Overall, a Marxist reading shows that the novel is not about survival after a global catastrophe, but also about how inequality and dehumanization can lead to the breakdown of social systems.
In conclusion, a Marxist reading of The Girl with All the Gifts reveals how power and class hierarchy shape relationships throughout the novel. Authority is consistently held by those who control resources, knowledge, and violence, while the infected children are positioned as powerless and expendable. The novel critiques capitalist logic by showing how survival, productivity, and progress are prioritized over human dignity. Characters in power justify exploitation by framing it as necessary for humanity's future, reflecting how capitalist systems often normalize inequality. Even after civilization collapses, the novel demonstrates that systems of exploitation and inequality do not disappear. Instead, they are reproduced through new forms of control, particularly through scientific and military authority. However, the text is not entirely pessimistic. Through resistance and transformation, especially in Melanie's character, the novel suggests that meaningful social change is possible when oppressive structures are challenged rather than preserved. To conclude the presentation, I would like to highlight several critical questions raised by the novel. First, the text asks us who is allowed to survive in times of crisis and who is considered disposable. This reflects real-world power structures where certain lives are valued more than others. Second, the novel challenges us to consider when survival becomes exploitation, especially when ideology is used to justify cruelty in the name of progress. Third, Melanie's reactions raise the question of whether revolution is justified in deeply oppressive system. From a Marxist perspective, the novel suggests that resistance may be necessary when inequality becomes normalized. Ultimately, The Girl with All the Gifts encourages readers to reflect on power, humanity, and justice, not only within the fictional world but also in real societies shaped by inequality and domination. Thank you.